The darkness, it flows within me. It seeps from every vein.
What's happening, plebs? Today we've got a bit of a discussion on floaters, and as you can see on screen, we have arguably one of the biggest offenders of such a thing, and that is, things just don't die anymore in Yu-Gi-Oh! And it's kind of like a general question to like ask people, like, do you think that floaters are like the cause for this game's, I don't want to say like downfall, but I mean, like, it's pretty obvious, like, people are, I think based off of what I know so far from the game, I think like people are more disillusioned with Yu-Gi-Oh! Now than they have ever been, mostly because of things like the pendulum mechanic, which is, an inherent, like, once per turn soul charge, like that's nuts to think about, right? The fact that that's like even a thing. The fact that you can just keep bringing your monsters back every turn. Burning Abyss as an archetype, like you can't like use traps against that deck without it, potentially like it just does nothing. You can't like if you strike a Burning Abyss monster, it's like it's not very good. There's just so much like stuff in this game that just doesn't die. And I kind of like started thinking for a while, like, is that really like why this game is like, kind of ascended to where it is now? Because I feel like without traps being good in Yu-Gi-Oh! And traps, arguably are probably at their worst now. I think like Solemn Strike's the only redeeming factor of like traps today. I think without traps, like, it shows that the game has like evolved so much to the point where it's just pure raw power. Like your monsters do everything for you. Your monsters are your attack, they're your defense, they're your just everything that you need to like win a game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Your monsters do for you. They act as negations, they steal monsters, they deal with problem cards. Like traps, spells not so much, but traps just don't do like anything for you anymore, and I guess it's a fair question to ask, like, are floaters what's like making this game just kind of like suck? I mean, for me personally, I don't want to like complain and stuff and be one of those people, one of those doomsayers, be like, "Yo, Yu-Gi-Oh's dead" and stuff like that, because I don't think it is at all. But the fact that like just nothing dies anymore, like you just can't get anything off the field, and when you do get something off the field, it probably has some kind of effect, like like Beatrice, for example. Like that card, just, you can't even warning that card. If you warning the summon of Beatrice, they get a Dante out of it because it says possession, for example. So it's like, what's the point in playing traps anymore if nothing just dies? Like, there's no point playing traps against Burning Abyss monsters because like most of the time it's going to be irrelevant. There's no point in like not playing a pendulum deck or Burning Abyss right now. There's like other decks, of course, but like everything else just seems a little bit like lackluster in comparison. Like Cosmo, like you can't get rid of a ship like because it will just float. I mean, it's hard enough to get rid of a Cosmo monster because of the fact that most of the good ones can't even be targeted, and when you do get rid of it, like by attacking over it somehow or something like that, it just floats into another one, so it's like, is this really like, good for the game, like that we're in such a position that you just can't kill anything anymore, like nothing like is off the field permanently. And yeah, so I've rambled a lot about that issue, right? And I think personally that that's a very, very, very big problematic thing to have, like the fact that you just can't play a game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Anymore, like meta at least, without things just coming back. Like even not so popular rogue decks like we have now on screen, like Infernoids, like you can't deal with an Infernoid monster because it just comes back anyway, because it goes to the graveyard and you special summon it from the graveyard. So it's like, how like monsters just don't die anymore. Monsters just literally just don't die, like they come back in some shape or form. And that's kind of just the question I want to pose for you. Of course, like there's many advantages to playing floaters and stuff, in terms of like how fun they are for the game and how good they are for the game, because like, I'm not saying that we need a full trap format, because sometimes that's just really super helmet. Like, okay, like, does this guy have 70,000 health? Am I tripping? 98,000 health, 70,000? What is going on? I'm not going to question it. Anyway, so yeah, that's pretty much like a discussion I wanted to open up for you guys today and just ask, like, are we in an era of Yu-Gi-Oh! Where like traps are bad inherently because of the fact that everything just floats through them? Are we in an era of Yu-Gi-Oh! Where like like it's not even like, I wouldn't say it's not fun, but the fact that like, you know, resources are fairly expendable, it becomes a bit of a nuisance at best, like at worst, you know, and a serious like flaw and problem with the game at worst. And I just, you know, was curious to ask, like, is this, you know, one of the worst eras of Yu-Gi-Oh we're at, where monsters just float into one another, traps kind of just, you know, don't really do much of anything, like for the most part. So yeah, that's kind of what I just wanted to ask. Of course, there's positives to be had in the other direction. No denying that, of course. But I was just curious to know what other people think. Like, do you think that like floaters are inherently bad for the game? That's my big question. Like, are floaters like sort of a bad thing for the game? Because the way I see it, like, I feel like the graveyard has too much power in Yu-Gi-Oh! Like, it's not a graveyard anymore for like a lot of decks. It's like it's a second hand for some decks. Do you know what I mean? It's like literally like another. Like, you have your extra deck, and you have your main deck, and then you have like your graveyard, which is like somehow still part, like it's its own little deck for some archetypes. Do you know what I mean? So, you know, like it's become a bit too commonplace. Like, I understand, you know, having a graveyard based deck is pretty cool, but like it feels like almost every deck has like a graveyard to some extent. You know what I mean? Even pendulums don't really have a graveyard because their graveyard is your extra deck. You know, everything just goes back to the extra deck for the most part. Like, of course, like you overlay and you get warning, that's different, but you know what I'm saying, like for the most part, you know, when you're making your turn 1 board into Ignisters and stuff like that, everything just goes back to your extra deck. You know, you're not synchroing and then it's gone, like the material, like you're not sacrificing synchro materials or anything, you know, it just goes to the extra deck and then you bring it out again. So there's no graveyard for that deck, like turn 1, for example. You know, Burning Abyss want to hit the graveyard at some point. You know, you want to hit your graph in the graveyard. Cosmos can do so many like silly combos and stuff when it hits the graveyard. Even Monarchs have like a Prime, which just revives itself from the graveyard every turn to provide tribute fodder. They can use a Rebus in the graveyard to recover their Monarchs and stuff like that. So really the big question is, like, how do you really kill a monster like in 2016? Like, most monsters just don't seem to die, like in this day and age, you know? So yeah, that's what I just wanted to ask. Let me know what you guys think if you've watched this far. Let's go for hashtag free the graveyard or something. Yeah, that sounds pretty funny. So if you've watched this far, let me know in the comment section by typing hashtag free the graveyard. And of course, let me know what your opinion is. I'd like to know, like, do you think floaters are inherently bad for this game? Do you think floating needs to be toned down in some shape or form? And what are the alternatives? And if not, like, if you actually do like the idea that every deck just sort of relies on the graveyard to some extent, let me know why. And yeah, hashtag free the graveyard, and I'll see you next time.
Now that you've heard our whispers, it is